Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, Tuesday, December 22nd. Yes, 2020. All right, time for another show. Sitting down and enjoying a new kind of tea. A cup of, what is it? Sweet tangerine? Yes, Scott, thanks very much for, listening closely to the show and realizing, gosh, I'm still having trouble getting the voice up and started each morning. And so, thanks very much. A nice holiday box full of various herbal teas that I've been trying out these days, and all sort of throat health oriented, I guess. So doing his best to keep the show up, running, and clean sounding. Thanks very much. You didn't have to. And it's always very nice, though, to be thought of this way. And we'll try all these fun teas out. He sent me this one along with a note in email yesterday, that the sweet tangerine, which does in fact smell fantastic, very sweet too, it really is. I don't know what else is in here besides tangerine, but he said keep some on hand, and maybe you should too, as a COVID test, a free handy instant COVID test. If you can't smell this, you have COVID, or I guess I don't know, have corks stuck up your nose, or perhaps have been wallowing in I don't know, who knows what. But it seems like a much better test to simply have some of this delicious tea. So thanks very much. Time to get the show up and running today. It is Tuesday. I heard last night, I checked in with Joan. I had to make sure. I remember last week she was off, and this sort of feels like a week where you would be off, right? But maybe not. So I checked in, and apparently, yeah, though they are short-staffed for this holiday week, there is a more relaxed schedule going on this holiday week as well. So it sounds like she'll be able to make some time for us and join us at some point in the 10 o'clock hour. Let's see. Just checking in on Twitter news this morning and seeing what's hot and interesting, including Greg Dworkin has sent me a couple of articles since we spoke yesterday. I guess the headline of the morning that he has sent on is Jonathan Swan's work over at Axios, which I just also saw somebody else retweeting around under with the comment of, God, what a headline. Headline here is, Trump turns on everyone, which, of course, Trump will be reading, oh, this is great. Trump turns on everyone. Everyone loves me. I turn everybody on. All the ladies love Donald Trump. Well, this is him turning against everyone else, and starkly illustrated with an interesting photo of him casting a large shadow on the White House. Somebody else is nearby, too. It looks to be, from the silhouette, the shadow, perhaps Mike Pence. And guess what? He's one of the everyone else's. President Trump in his final days in office is what they mean. But, I just was daydreaming there for a second. President Trump in his final days is turning bitterly on virtually every person around him, because that's who he is and what he does, griping about anyone who refuses to indulge conspiracy theories or hopeless bids to overturn the election, several top officials tell Axios. Now they go into their little bullet pointing and paragraphing exercise where they do stuff like, this is a very interesting model of journalism that they do. They have that why it matters part, which really is like, that's the whole point of the article, and if you can condense it down to, the latest and why it matters, then just forget the rest. But I know, I think they think they're doing everybody a big favor, and maybe, I don't know, I'm certain there are people out there who are just too busy to read the whole of the article and get every bit of information that you can get out of it. I mean, we sometimes, when we're running out of time, we will do that sort of thing, but I just can't imagine getting your top line news that way and thinking you're super informed and one of the insiders who reads Axios all the time and all you're reading is why it matters. Oh, good. Thanks for telling me why it matters. If you don't know, what are you doing here? But okay, never mind. Anyway, it's not such a bad thing. and just make fun of it every time. So what do we got here? Trump turning on everybody and griping about people who refuse to indulge his stupid theories. The latest, it says in this, after this little blurb here that says in bold, the latest, targets of his outrage include Vice President Pence, and this could easily just be read by saying that the latest targets of his outrage include Vice President Pence, Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, White House Counsel Pat Cipollone, Secretary of State Pompeo, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. That's a pretty comprehensive list of people around him. Why it matters? He's the president, and they're top officials in the United States government. And if he's purging them from the government in his last days in order to contemplate stupid conspiracy theories about how he's the conquering hero and president for life, that's bad. But what's their idea of why it matters? Trump thinks everyone around him is weak, stupid, or disloyal. And he may have them on some of these things. And increasingly, it notes he seeks comfort only in people who egg him on to overturn the election results. We cannot stress enough how unnerved Trump officials are by the conversations unfolding inside the White House. They could try, of course, and put it in bold and with a colon. How concerned are they? Very. I think we've stressed it enough now by giving it its own little paragraph header. Okay, top officials are trying to stay away from the West Wing right now. Trump is lashing out, and everyone is in the blast zone. At this point, if you're not in the how is this constructed? At this point, if you're not in the use the Department of Homeland Security or the military to impound voting machines camp, okay, I see, then the president considers you weak and beneath contempt. Now, don't worry, I'll always consider you worthy of contempt. Trump is fed up with Cipollone, his counsel. Some supporters of Cipollone are worried that Trump is on the brink of removing him and replacing him with a fringe loyalist, which is kind of amazing considering who Pat Cipollone is, really, if you just stop and think about it for a second. I would say, Pat Cipollone, to me, is best known for his being one of the more competent, legally speaking, defenders that Trump had during his impeachment proceedings. And, of course, as White House counsel, he really never should have been. I guess he could. I would never have put him in that role, I guess, as White House counsel. But okay, I wouldn't have put him in either role. But I suppose it's one or the other, in my view, of whether you're defending him at his impeachment trial or serving the institution of the White House. I would have had different people doing that job. I don't know whether we discussed it at the time, but anyway, I guess this is supposed to be case in point here. Cipollone put it all on the line, his reputation, his career, everything. Not that, I don't know, maybe that's too much to say. His reputation for the time being, his career for the time being. Later on, he'll be a Harvard fellow at something, and someone will hire him as a partner, and this will all be bygones. You know how this stuff works. But he put it all out there to defend the president, and I guess, I'm sure the president views it this way, and I guess it's fair enough to view it this way. The Senate was never going to convict him no matter what, obviously, because the case was open and shut. The case could be made open and shut right now to impeach him again over the things he's doing. But, I still think they could convict him if they were honest on the Ukraine stuff. But anyway, I was going to say, ordinarily you'd think, all right, well, the president owes, at least in some part, his continued survival in office to Pat Cipollone. Trump never really views things that way, no matter what the situation is. And, of course, you could say he has a point. The Senate was Republican and in Trump's corner and was never going to listen to the evidence no matter what. So maybe Pat Cipollone isn't all that important after all, and so he should be pushed out if he's not sufficiently loyalist. But, he was, at the time when Trump's tenure in office, at least theoretically, was on the line, he was one of the leaders in saving his skin. And I guess Trump is now showing you how much he values his disgusting orange skin and wants Cipollone out. That's kind of amazing. And, of course, like I said, to throw yourself so wholly into his defense in an impeachment trial in which he was so clearly guilty would ordinarily qualify you as a fringe loyalist. So the phrase here, I'm like quadrupling the length of this Axios article. All these things that I guess I don't know whether you're supposed to infer all this stuff yourself, or it might just be that these things just don't occur to Axios reporters. I have no idea where they are headspace wise. But anyway, it's just an amazing thing to say. What we really need is to get rid of Cipollone and get a fringe loyalist. That's what Cipollone is. That's what he did during the impeachment. That's why he's there now. But this is supposed to illustrate the extremes to which Trump is going, and I guess it does. A source who spoke to Trump said the president was complaining about Pence, switching gears here, and brought up a Lincoln Project ad, oh boy, that claims that Pence is, quote, backing away from Trump. This ad has clearly got inside Trump's head, the source said. And there's plenty of room. It's a vacant space. Might as well. Trump views Pence not as fighting hard enough for him, or as not fighting hard enough for him. I was going to say, where's this going? The same complaint he uses against virtually everybody who works for him and has been loyal to him. And that really, I think, is the point. The main point of the article is that he's in this situation of, why does this keep happening to me? Everybody turns against me because I do something that they view as terrible or insupportable or way over the line at some point. And why does everybody do that? I can't believe it. Even my own vice president, my own White House counsel, my own Secretary of State, my own personal lawyer, one after the other, they're all against me. I'm never wrong. You see what's going on, obviously. Pence's role on January 6th has begun to loom large in Trump's mind. Again, plenty of room to roam freely in there, according to people who have discussed the matter with him. I know I put away an article that begins to address this too. I guess I'm starting to get a clearer picture of where Pence might be in his head on January 6th. And it's important to know what he's going to do. We've postulated before, and I think it's fair to say that I've approached the thinking about what is at least theoretically possible on January 6th with the idea in mind that, sure, Pence might, in fact, just be the kind of loyalist automaton that Trump wants in his presiding over the joint session on January 6th. But it's kind of hard to, it's not impossible that he might just end up being gun-shy in all this and just saying, I just can't do it. And the parliamentarian says I'm supposed to do X, and I'm just going to do that. Especially as it turns out, or as things progress, and Mitch McConnell makes it clear that, at least he floats the story that we read yesterday, that he doesn't want this objection going forward. And if it absolutely does have to go forward because he can't control his conference and perhaps some of his newer members of the Senate. We found out that yesterday that football coach turned Senator-elect, whose name we haven't yet learned to pronounce, Tommy Tuberville, has said he, at least now, intends to sign on to whatever objections might be made such that they can survive the floor in the joint session and cause a division back into the respective houses and some debates and votes on whether or not to accept these electoral votes. So that may go forward despite what Mitch McConnell wants. But it's sounding like the official Republican conference, Senate conference position on this thing is to quash it. And so I thought Pence would eventually go along with it as well. And in puzzling out the game here, especially the game of sending these counterfeited certificates of vote that the Republican, in some cases the would-be electors who lost in Biden states, who lost in their bids to be selected to join the Electoral College, who sent along their votes anyway. I was wondering what's the physical mechanism by which they hope to get these certificates under consideration. And I don't know that they ever really do. I think they are just sort of play acting along and performing a stunt to attract attention to the fact that they intend to, conduct a public fight, even if they think it's doomed. But their counterfeited documents are not actually, of course, required for the objection to be made on the floor, nor are they required as part of the debate. I guess the theory that they were putting forward was, well, if they somehow succeed in convincing Congress not to accept the official certificates of vote from these states, then ours will be the last certificate standing. And in an effort to not exclude the electoral votes of these states from the final count, they might turn and take ours. But I also see no reason why that would happen, nor any opportunity for the Congress to actually contemplate that. But my main question is, do they care? And if so, how do they care? How do they intend to get their counterfeit certificates into the hands of whoever it is who will be handing certificates to Pence to open, examine, and hand to the tellers to read to the joint session and put into the total on January 6th? And then I haven't worked out, unless Pence is actually interested in actively helping to engineer this thing for whatever reason, and his employees are as well and can be instructed to do this. I imagine that these things, they show up in the mail, of course, through registered mail, they're addressed to the President of the Senate. And I imagine that they go unopened through the Senate mail processing facility to the office of the President of the Senate. I'm sure Pence must, I never really actually examined this. I didn't work in the Senate, and so I never found myself wandering by. But my assumption is that they maintain some suite of offices there for the Vice President, even though the Vice President is rarely there. But they've got a ceremonial function and a constitutional function. So there's probably somewhere an office of the President of the Senate, just as there's a suite of offices, of course, for the Speaker of the House. But in addition to her congressional legislative office, where she would be dealing with issues of constituent representation, etc., there's a suite of offices dedicated to the work of presiding over the House. There's probably a similar office there. I know the majority leader and minority leader in the House maintain similar offices. There's probably an official one. So the mail, I assume, ends up there. Someone on staff there. I can't believe that they would just be handing unopened envelopes to the Vice President during a joint session and just saying, open it. Maybe there's peanut brittle with a coiled up spring snake inside. Go ahead and open it. Or I imagine they get opened and examined and verified and, brought along to the House floor, having been examined, but maybe not. I mean, normally you can trust these things, I guess, to say enough to say, we'll let the Vice President open them. But also that's kind of an awkward thing and to do, and opening the envelopes. And I imagine they're already opened. But are the employees in the office of the President of the Senate, who, they wouldn't see Mike Pence an awful lot, or any vice president a whole lot. They rarely come by. I imagine that they're staffed with people of Pence's choice, but it might also be like, he talks to his chief of staff and says, hire up some people to staff the mailroom and make sure the water coolers are filled in the office of the President of the Senate for me. They might not be Pence loyalists per se. They might be Republican loyalists, surely, but they might not be Pence loyalists or Trump loyalists for that matter. So that's a weak point in the scheme too. Are they the kind of people who would open up if these idiots in Arizona or whatever other states send their fake counterfeit documents to the office of the President of the Senate and they open it up and they say, oh, this is the thing I read about in the paper? Would they take that thing and say, yeah, I'll be part of the lunatic Trump scheme. here, and I will put these things in his pile. I will cause these things to be handed to him on national television, causing him to, if he's not expecting them, stare like a deer in the headlights into the cameras of C-SPAN at the critical moment of electing the next president and have him decide on the spot what to do. Or are they planning it? Are they sitting down and talking this through? Is Pence actually saying, yes, I would like to hand the tellers two conflicting documents, one of which is counterfeit but purports to be the actual certificate of vote from Arizona, but also the real one that may or may not be accompanied on the floor with the certificate of ascertainment that we discussed that arrives the day before. I mean, there is no, I don't think any of the counterfeiting groups were smart enough. I think they might have been smart enough to actually mail, maybe even registered mail, their fake documents to the office of the President of the Senate. But I don't think that they were together enough to send a faked up certificate of ascertainment ahead of time that would, seek to verify their counterfeit certificate of vote. So, it might be perfectly obvious, or for all I know, and I think about it, I haven't examined the process enough. I don't know whether the certificate of ascertainment likewise goes to the House floor, but it might, and it would be a good idea to send them in case there's any question. But you really have to engineer this thing carefully, and I don't know whether, again, they have, I imagine they have a set rotation between the four tellers that they will have, and they might be able to game it out such that they can guarantee at least sending the first set of conflicting certificates of vote to a friendly Republican teller. But a lot of people actually have to be involved in this scheme. Or they could just ignore the fact that there are these papers here. Or they could have some of the members of Congress who intend to object just carry those copies on to the floor with them. And I think they're smart, maybe smart's not the word, but smart enough to know that if they wave that paper around on camera while they are making their objection, 99.9% of the American public who might even be watching C-SPAN or see the tape later won't know the difference when Louis Gohmert waves this thing around and it looks kind of official. It's been counterfeited and says, this is the real certificate of vote. That one up there is a counterfeit, or something to that effect. It might be that dramatic. It might just be, here's a competing thing and we should consider both or whatever. But, at that point, you might as well just say that yours is the real one and that's the counterfeit. And people won't know the difference, and they won't know, well, no, this one is actually verified by a previously received certificate of ascertainment. And no, there isn't any opportunity for you to make a motion from the floor for the desk to receive this alternative certificate. The certificates have to be served up to the office of the President of the Senate in a very particular way, as outlined by law. Those things haven't gone that way. That's just another strike against them. One, there's no certificate of ascertainment that says I have to listen to these people who purport to be electors. Two, it was not sent via registered mail to the office of the Vice President or the President of the Senate. There's a lot of things wrong with these documents. But if there's, if they want to strategize this out, and Pence is prepared to go all the way with this, what if he says, hey, bring that up here. Let me have a look at that. And, the parliamentarian is waving at him. And, oh, God, what are you doing? This is absolutely crazy. You can't do this. And he just keeps doing it. People are seeing it on camera, and they're seeing people whisper. And, they're not going to see the parliamentarian tackle Pence and say, this is it. He's crazy. I'm taking over. So, I don't know. I suppose you could. Trump can certainly demand that Pence push it this far. I could see why Pence might be uncomfortable with it, and that might be the seed of truth that the Lincoln Project ad is talking about. He is trying to back away and distance himself from this stuff. Or that would be a legitimate interpretation of things anyway, or a good guess. So let's see. Just before our break here, we'll continue on with this otherwise minimalist Axios piece. We're providing all the color for here. Axios should be paying us for this. Pence's role on January 6th has begun to loom large in Trump's mind. Trump would view Pence performing his constitutional duty and validating the election result, that is, as the ultimate betrayal. A new fixation, it is noted here, Trump has been asking advisors whether they can get state legislatures to rescind their electoral votes. There's not much time left on that on that clock. But anyway, when he's told no, he lashes out even more, said a source who discussed the matter with the president. By the way, tomorrow is the date outlined in the statutes after which, if the state's certificates of votes haven't arrived at the archives, nothing happens. It's not an official penalty or anything, but the archivist is supposed to start chasing after the certificates. Where are they? Call the states and say, we don't have them, because it's, 2 weeks until January 6th, and you're running out of time to get these things in the right hands. And I guess that also means that there's still time for Trump's plotters to intervene and try and, make some dramatic swap of the counterfeit certificates for the real ones. All right, we'll just finish this up before we exit out for the break. An Oval Office meeting Monday night, which you've doubtless heard about, but very similar to the others that have occurred over the past couple of days. During this meeting on Monday night, Trump spoke with House Republicans about voting to overturn the result on January 6th, a desperate vote that even Trump has privately acknowledged he's bound to lose. The person who has the worst job in Washington, according to multiple administration officials, the incoming head of the Justice Department, Jeffrey Rosen, now that Barr has stepped down to spend more time with his family. The consensus is that he has no earthly idea the insanity he's in for, and next month will be the longest month of his life. We'll get back to this after this short break. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. Okay, I better keep up with things here. I'm just going to open up a couple of stories as I was scanning through Twitter during the break. Where were we? Oh, yes, right, the Axios article. The short thing that doesn't say anything that we're adding all the color commentary to. By the way, when Greg sent it to me, he sent the tweet of, who is this? I got to look at this. William Adler, 78, as a matter of fact, in case you wanted to follow along. Associate Professor of Political Science at Northeastern Illinois University. And blogger at a House Divided APD.com. Is that right? Divided APD. Okay. Well, APD, I don't know. But that's how you can find it. And his tweet was that the cherry on top of this presidency would be Trump rejecting every loyalist like Pence who put themselves on the line for him over and over again. I think so. Okay. Let's see. Okay, well, that's of some interest there. Just noting in passing, John Thune, apparently, according to Talking Points Memo's tweet here, says any challenge to the Electoral College tally would, quote, go down like a shot dog. I'm not even certain what that... I mean, I get the point, certainly, but it was an interesting choice. I don't know if I would have selected that phrase, and it seems to convey what he meant. But okay, so another Republican senator on the no side of that one. And it's worth keeping a tally here. Where do we leave off with Axios? Another reflection of Trump's state of mind was coming next. As Axios reported Monday night, the president got his personal assistant to email Republican lawmakers a PowerPoint slide. It's displayed above here. We'll take a look at it. Attacking McConnell for being, quote, the first one off the ship, and absurdly claiming credit for the Senate Majority Leader's victory in his Kentucky re-election. That is rather absurd. It's quite a message to send 2 weeks out from crucial runoff races in Georgia, where Republicans need to stay unified. And then they ask this question, which I would never ask, but they do, because they're journalists. Where's Jared? Okay. A source told Axios that Kushner, who yesterday participated in a tree planting ceremony in Jerusalem's Forest Grove of Nations. Okay. In Jerusalem Forest's Grove of Nations, thank you, is focused on the Middle East. Okay. Even when he was working on the Middle East peace project, he wasn't focused on the Middle East. But imagine that, right? Well, where is he? What's he going to... only Axios would ask this. Like I said, because it's Axios, and because they're journalists, I was joking because I sort of thought, oh, well, journalists, they're pursuing every angle. But what I really, the subtext of that is because they're journalists, specifically Washington insider, cocktail party circuit, back in pre-COVID days anyway, type journalists, they're going to ask, where's Jared? Because like idiots, they view, Jared's position on these things is important and impactful. Which, I guess they can't be blamed entirely for. I mean, we have learned, allegedly, actually from these people, so I suppose we have basis on which to question it. We've learned that Kushner wields an awful lot of influence, but it's a very specific kind of influence, although it is the kind of influence that these people are most interested in. He's not a policy heavyweight, which explains, for instance, why he's in the Middle East, focusing on the Middle East 2 years after he was handed this project. Not that anybody could wrap up a Middle East peace project for real in 2 years, but anything that he's been handed that has to do with policy, has just languished. There's just no solution because he's not going to be able to propose any sort of solution. Anything that is about feeding the politics side, I mean, he's inept at that as well, but he throws himself into that stuff because it's just favor trading and he understands that. But because it's the politics, that's what the political journalists love to pursue. So I guess he remains a player of influence in that he can influence, i.e. screw up, the politics of any situation for himself and for Trump, who he's supposed to be working for. And so they'll ask the question, where's Jared? But in the context of, well, we're having a constitutional crisis, what are we going to do to alleviate the tensions, weather the storm, and right the ship of state and continue on as a constitutional republic? Where's Jared in all this? Yeah, well, Jared's nowhere in all this. When it comes to answering for his boss, well, I got to go to Jerusalem and plant a tree. What? Are you kidding me? This is the biggest constitutional crisis we've ever faced, and you're the moderating influence. You and Ivanka are supposed to talk him off of this ledge. Where are you? I'm the Middle East peace guy. Is there anything seriously, is there anything more dramatic, that has greater gravitas in the American psyche, and at least as far as foreign policy goes, as U.S. leadership in the Middle East peace process? That's me. I got to go. Planting this tree could be the difference, So he's ducking all responsibility, of course, and he's ducking all sorts of, other problems here, which we do have some other articles about, like, for instance, everyone discovering that he stole all the campaign money. That's a good time to go to Jerusalem and hide out and pretend, oh yeah, Middle East peace, remember that? Yeah, but weren't you also supposed to be here solving the various COVID crises? Jerusalem, gotta go. Anyway, it says it's a perfect visual encapsulation of Kushner's absence on the other side of the world, planting a tree with Bibi and accepting plaudits while Trump discusses mayhem with Sidney Powell. And I guess that's a good line. They've done a good job wrapping things up there. It is pretty amazing. Well, speaking of Jared Kushner, because I just said we were, Salon has this piece, which I wanted to read through and discover whether it tells us anything more than what was hinted at the other day, which was that Kushner was the one who engineered the series of shell corporations that funneled over $500 million away from out of the campaign funds and possibly into the pockets of family members and other cronies along the way. Is there more to it in this story than that he was responsible for that network of corporations, or what? Their headline says, Jared Kushner signed off on secret payments to top campaign officials, source says. Source tells Salon that dubious shell company arrangements to pay top officials were approved by Kushner and Trump. Roger Solenberger writing this, and it's a new piece. So I wondered what new information, if any, there might be in this. Because last time I think the chief focus of the article was, well, he's the one who approved the structure and maybe even was the one who established or directed to be established these network of LLCs to hide this money and shuffle it around. But then there was I guess it was more than a supposition. I guess they had followed the money that these companies had then made payments to family members, but there was some question somehow over whether or not Kushner had authorized those payments as well. But if he's the one who established or caused to be established these LLCs, then it stands to reason that he would also direct their decision making. But maybe this is the missing legal link for establishing his guilt later on. And it's illustrated with two, annoying looking photos. One of Jared Kushner in his slim suit and one of Jason Miller in his very not slim suit, let's say. Top White House advisor Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, in case you didn't know, personally signed off on keeping salary payments to top campaign officials off the books. According to a person involved with the arrangements, Federal Election Commission records show that the Trump campaign has made no salary payments to chief strategist Jason Miller, and he's not doing things for free, who came on board in June, or to campaign manager Bill Stepien, who joined the campaign in late 2018 and took over the top job from Brad Parscale in July. Parscale, by the way, I saw tweeting the other day, remains a Trump loyalist, maybe not surprisingly, even though they tried to hang this whole thing on him. But maybe now he feels vindicated and so has room in his heart for accepting Trump back into his life. Kushner agreed to both arrangements and personally directed the payments to Miller, the person involved says. So there you have it. And by the way, this, I guess, should help you hearken back to the 2016 campaign in which Paul Manafort said he wasn't being paid and Roger Stone said he wasn't being paid. And who else was not being paid? I can't even remember. Now, there was another person. I meant to start with him. But anyway, oh yeah, right. Steve Bannon, he's not being paid. Right. But again, the FEC reports say that the official campaign structure, Donald J. Trump for president or whatever they call the thing, isn't paying these people directly. They're instead paying $600 million to American-Made Media, which is a different company. And it won't say in the FEC reports where American-Made Media's money goes. You'd have to look at whatever data is available on what kind of cuts American-Made Media cut. And it's not entirely clear from not entirely clear what you're legally entitled to force a corporation like that to disclose in those situations. And that was the whole point of moving those funds off the FEC examined books. While the Trump campaign has reported $20,000 monthly salary payments to Chief of Staff Stephanie Alexander and Senior Advisor Katrina Pearson, oh my God, $20,000 a month to Katrina Pearson. What a waste. It has not done the same for COO Jeff DeWitt or Senior Advisors Bob Paduchik and Bill Shine. These are actually not names that I heard a lot about in the campaign. But these are Stephanie Alexander and Katrina Pearson both paid $20,000 a month straight out of the campaign. So that is in the FEC reports. Deputy campaign manager Justin Clark has not taken a direct payment from the campaign since February of 2019, according to federal records. Instead, the campaign has paid these top-tier advisors through intermediaries, some of which are still unknown. For instance, according to the source, after salary negotiations with Miller, Kushner directed the campaign to route the top strategist's $35,000 monthly payment through Jamestown Associates, a media and production firm where Miller once worked, interesting, and which the campaign contracts with for video production. Miller, who is currently contesting child support payments in court, another good reason, bad reason, for him to hide his income. Miller requested the anonymous arrangement for the $420,000 annual rate for unclear reasons. The reasons are pretty clear. He doesn't want to be hounded for paying his child support. Communications, court documents, and FEC filings reviewed by Salon make clear that the money was paid by way of Jamestown to Miller by way of Jamestown is probably what they mean. President Trump himself was aware of the deal, a person involved said, which is amazing. What does he care? Anyway, to this point, the campaign has not told the government that it has paid Miller anything. Instead, it has stated that all payments to Jamestown are for, quote, video production, without mentioning Miller's name or strategy work. Furthermore, Miller's official role means that he has often directed how and when the campaign uses Jamestown Associates, the company that technically pays him. He's his own boss's boss. Stepien replaced Pascal as campaign manager in mid-July and allegedly pleased Trump by taking a pay cut when he accepted that position. Salon reported last week that in 2018 the campaign created an in-house shell company called American-Made Media Consultants, AMMC, in response to rumors about Pascal's spending, which, according to a campaign source, had made the president uneasy. This is a slightly different story here. It was, I guess, that they kept hearing that Pascal was stealing all the money. So what they did was they siphoned off more than half of the money and put it into American-Made Media Consultants in an effort to, if it's out the door, then Pascal can't steal it and carry it out the different door. If we carry it out the back door, Pascal can't carry it out. It's not there to be carried out by Pascal out the front door. And that's the scheme. But, unless I'm reading things wrong, and it's possible that I've recalled them incorrectly, but it sounded like the first spin was that not only was Pascal stealing money out the front door, but that he was perhaps the one responsible for AMMC, and he was also stealing money out the back door. And the people who really were stealing the money out the back door through AMMC didn't do anything to dissuade people from the impression that it was Pascal stealing money out the back door as well. And it seemed like they were trying to hang both on him when in fact it was them stealing the money out the back door, which is very creative. Evil genius in an evil genius sort of way. Reports over the summer said that Pascal had stepped aside partly in response to criticism of his profligate spending, which Stepien promised to rein in. In fact, the campaign's expenses increased significantly after Stepien took over, including, FEC records show, payments to a company called Elections LLC, a legal firm that Stepien founded in 2019. With fellow campaign advisor Justin Clark. Stepien and Clark, who worked together in the Trump White House until late 2018, were paid by the firm instead of directly by the campaign, according to a person involved. And Kushner approved the third-party arrangement. That's not, by the way, entirely unique. You might see, for instance, in many previous campaigns, presidential and otherwise, payments to a consulting firm, and the consulting firm pays people who are acting as top campaign officials for this campaign, but it's usually a little bit more transparent. Like if you throw things way back to the 90s, I don't know that they definitely arranged things this way, but if you were to see, for instance, that the Bill Clinton presidential campaign was making, multi-million-dollar payments to the firm of Carville and Bagala, you would say, well, that makes sense because Carville and Begala are both top Trump, or, Trump, sure, top Clinton campaign officials, and this is essentially their payment for doing that work. But I guess if you were, the problem here is that it's much more obscuring in all this. Elections LLC. Well, who owns that? And if they don't say, well, Elections LLC, a production of Bill Stepien and what's the guy's name? Clark, then, you'd have to either know that or get a hold of their corporate filings that show you who the ownership of Elections LLC is. That's the way you use shell companies to obscure payments like that, not by paying Carville and Begala LLC. It doesn't really obscure anything. All right, so let's see. We stopped here by saying that Kushner had approved this third-party arrangement. FEC records show that some campaign expenses to Elections LLC are marked, attention, Stefan Passantino, the former White House deputy counsel, who also incorporated the campaign committee for Representative-elect Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people, a Georgia Republican and QAnon supporter. How odd. Payments to Elections LLC increased from $20,000 a month to $60,000 a month over the course of 2020. Stepien and Clark formed another firm in February of 2019 called National Public Affairs. A Trump spokesperson told Salon that AMMC does not pay that firm, but would not say whether Stepien was paid through Elections LLC. By contrast, Parscale's salary came through a firm that had his name on it, like we were talking about with Carville and Begala. And this is something that Parscale has said in the past. We've read it in the various articles about the accusations about him. He says, I don't own any secret companies. My company has my name on it. It's Parscale Strategy. It's a bad name, but it's on it. Anyway, Parscale Strategy took in more than $47,700 a month until the campaign reduced that by $15,000 a month following his demotion, federal filings show. Another top campaign advisor, Bob Paduchik, also does not appear to have, is it Paduchik or Paduchik? I don't know. Anyway, he also does not appear to have received any payments from the campaign, but he served as co-chair of the Republican National Committee from January 2017 to January 2019, when he departed to work for the Trump campaign. Federal records show that the RNC had him on the payroll during that time, but those RNC payments actually increased after he left for the campaign, except they then went to his consulting firm, Agincourt. Named for the French. Okay. Is it, except what did they say, Agincourt or Agincourt? Don't tell me. I can't take it. Anyway, it's even less clear how the campaign compensates Shine, a former Fox News executive who was on the network's payroll while serving in the Trump White House. All of this, of course, would have been a major scandal under any other president, but it's meh at this point. The same holds true for campaign COO Jeff DeWitt, whom Trump had previously appointed as CFO at NASA. Everybody's pretty busy. They're planting trees, they're making world peace, they're administering NASA and running his campaign. It's not clear what role Kushner had in those arrangements, if any, but the person familiar with the campaign told Salon that Kushner would have signed off on any and all decisions at that level. Trump campaign spokesperson Tim Murtaugh told Salon that the allegation Kushner had signed off on the payment arrangements was false, and that the campaign reported all expenditures as required by federal law. Murtaugh did not respond to specific follow-up questions about how top campaign officials were compensated, because that would blow up the scheme of being able to say that they followed federal law. All payments we made are reported as required by federal law. It's just that we made them to corporations that won't tell you what they're doing with the money. So it's essentially useless. But, so is our campaign finance reporting scheme in this country. When previously asked about the missing payroll receipts, Brendan Fisher, director of the Federal Reform Program at the Campaign Legal Center, told Salon, "It doesn't surprise me at all. The Trump campaign has disguised millions of dollars in payments to personnel and vendors by routing that money through LLCs created or managed by senior Trump campaign officials, or in this case, family members. In July, the CLC filed an FEC complaint alleging that the Trump campaign had unlawfully covered up at least $170 million in payments through AMMC, thereby keeping its spending a secret from federal enforcement agencies, its own donors, and the public. Some campaign disbursements allegedly went towards salaries, the complaint says, such as payments to Kimberly Guilfoyle and Lara Trump, who were on the Parscale strategy payroll. Oh, I didn't even realize that. Now that I mention it, I guess it makes some sense. And I think I recall hearing something like that. Parscale had to give them money out of his end. Interesting. And I don't know whether that continued after his demotion or not. Maybe then they began drawing from AMMC. Not sure of the chronology of all that, but okay. Some surreptitious theft afoot, and just thought I'd keep up with documenting it along the way. Okay, let's see. That's an interesting opinion piece to ponder, including in our roundup. Trump threatens 30-day reign of destruction on the way out of office. But, of course, I think I skimmed through this one. I recommend it if you feel like reading through it. It's an opinion piece at CNN. Let's see. Is it Stephen Collinson is the analyst who writes this thing up. It's a pretty good recitation of all of the craziness that that Trump might still perpetrate over the next 30 days, but I don't think there was any groundbreaking news in that, just a good recitation of just how out of control he is and what he might be willing to do, but I didn't hear anything new in that one. Just, basically, I thought very nice encapsulation and expression of the outrage that we all ought to be feeling about it, so I'll recommend that to your reading for offline times here. Let's see. Right, then there was the CNN report about the conservative House members' strategy session with Trump inside the White House about what to do on January 6th. A coronavirus item. I know everything is sort of haphazard in the way it's parked in pocket here. It's in chronological order that I found it, not necessarily in thematic. I can try one day to group some of these things with tags, but it seems like too much work. So random coronavirus note for the moment. The First Lady of South Carolina, the governor of South Carolina's wife, has tested positive for coronavirus. So good luck, or congratulations, rather, for passing the test with flying colors. This I read in The Hill. It's been reported elsewhere first, I'm sure. South Carolina's First Lady, Peggy McMaster, not related to H.R. McMaster, I don't think. The governor's name down there is Henry McMaster. They all just love being called Master, I guess. So Peggy McMaster has tested positive for coronavirus on Friday. Governor Henry McMaster's office said this weekend. The kicker is down here. The governor, by the way, said he's tested negative, and the First Lady was not experiencing symptoms. But both attended a White House Christmas party that previous Monday evening after testing negative for the virus earlier in the day. So they tested them on the way in. We don't want you people bringing your disgusting coronavirus into this Christmas party, but you are welcome to leave with it. See, this is our present to you. Brian Sims, a spokesperson for the governor's office, said both wore a face covering when it was necessary and when social distancing wasn't possible, which means that's the dodgy lingo for they didn't wear masks. They wore a face covering when it was necessary, which it wasn't at this party, and when social distancing wasn't possible. That's the guidelines, the loosest possible interpretation of the CDC's guidelines. No one was Brian Sims there walking around with a tape measure so that he could swear to the press that he was telling the truth? No, that's the big dodge. All right, so the rest of it, who cares, right? She's got COVID, and I guess the only test now is, will she get sick? And if she does, or even before she gets sick, like right now, Trump yesterday should have, if if he cared about cronyism, which he really doesn't, he's so selfish he doesn't even care about cronyism in some cases, he would have picked up the phone and called somebody somewhere and made sure that the governor's wife got the Regeneron therapy preventatively. This would be the time you would want to do it. And that you could make the miracle save that was made for him at Walter Reed. But he's not picking up the phone for someone as low down the totem pole as the governor of South Carolina's wife. He doesn't care. He probably doesn't even have any idea who she is. But, I'm sure they issued a White House statement saying, well, we got to say something, sir. We're the ones that made her sick by inviting her to the stupid unmasked White House Christmas party. Well, it's not my fault. She came. That was her choice. I just put the invitations out there. Don't give her anything. How old is she? Both the governor and his wife are 73, the article notes, making them significantly more at risk for hospitalization. The First Lady's diagnosis follows Representative Joe Wilson announcing that his own diagnosis earlier this week. You remember, you lie, Joe Wilson. He's got the coronavirus, so I'm sure you're all happy about that. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Yvette and members of her family also tested positive in the fall. So, well done there, South Carolina. Good luck to the rest of you. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to scroll a little bit further down. Although, oh yes, we're right about up on break time here. So not much further we can go before the music takes us out. But let's see. All right, well, I have parked here news that you have likely heard by now that Bill Barr, of course, on his way out the door, had a departing press conference on Monday in which he, as the headline here and from the Washington Post tells us, undercuts Trump by saying that there's no basis for seizing voting machines, as Rudy Giuliani would like to do, or using special counsels to do any investigating, rejecting the idea of naming any special counsel to investigate so-called voter fraud, much less Sidney Powell. So we do have that, and the president and his supporters turning on Bill Barr, calling him a traitor, etc., etc. But he doesn't care. He's leaving to go have Christmas with his family. All right, we'll be back after 1 minute and into our 10 o'clock hour, see what else we can cram in, and of course, wait for Joan. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. Where do we exit? Oh, yes, right. The discussion of Bill Barr and his press conference the other day. Where can we go? Oh, yes, and I should also say, in case you're listening, don't fret, Joan. When I said, I just realized as we exit here, oh, yeah, of course, coming back in the 10 o'clock hour to wait for Joan. What I mean is, during the 10 o'clock hour, we eagerly anticipate hearing from Joan. Not that, it's all about waiting for Joan, and what are we going to do until Joan shows up and saves the show? No, it's not quite like that. Although you do save the show when you call in, it's not your responsibility, for one thing. And there are plenty of stories, and I know you're busy. That's all I meant. Just good things. That's all you're meant to take away from this. All right, let's see. Oh, yes, interesting comment here. By the way, we might as well share from last night. Kate Sherrill making note of the fact that this time last year that she bet on Armando to drop the most F-bombs during a KITM broadcast in 2020. And it seemed like a safe bet, but who knew that our own Greg Dworkin, Dem from Connecticut, would be the dark horse to come through and break the record. So true, I wouldn't have bet that way either, and congratulations to Greg. It was lots of fun to go through and bleep all that stuff. By the way, I keep, just for the posterity, I keep copies of the shows. You know, I archive everything, usually for use as reruns later on, but I keep a bleeped and an unbleeped version, mostly, I think, of all the shows, in case we ever take Gil's advice and abandon the idea that we have to be family-oriented for a show like this, because no kids are going to listen to this show. My kids would never listen to this show, and I don't know whether any of yours would. But I don't know. There's also something about it. But on the other hand, it's very attractive, the prospect of being able to just say F everybody, even if I'm uncomfortable with it. Maybe someday soon, or maybe, that's a thing we could do, right? As a fundraiser, we could sell a compilation of all the uncensored versions of all of these things. Or I wonder if I could, if I had real skills with the computer, I could like auto-tune the clips of F-bombs and etc. from the various people calling into the show, guests and otherwise, into Christmas carols. That's probably the best recurring financial stream. And, like they have, I don't know, somebody made a fortune recording their dog barking and then auto-tuning that to a MIDI keyboard and playing jingle bells and dog barks and cat meows. But I think I should be able to do the same with, if I had the skills, it would be minimal trouble, I'm sure. But Greg and Armando cursing Christmas carols would probably be a big seller. I could make like $6 or $7 on that. And, that could pay for a value meal at some point. So I don't know why I'm not pursuing it. Anyway, other news I wanted to share with you. Things too numerous, really, to get through all of them. But scrolling down here, I'm reminded of some of these things. Let's try and cram a couple of them in. Here's an interesting proposal from an opinion piece in the Washington Post. Opinion is that of Ken Gormley. In italics here, which means it's true, it says that Ken Gormley is an expert on the Constitution. There's a lot of that going around these days, by the way. The presidency and the pardon power, and he may very well be. He is president of Duquesne University. Little known fact, the president of Duquesne University can pardon students for any infractions, I guess. So he has a very big pardon power. I don't know. But I'm sure he's a legal scholar at some point in his career and now raises money for Duquesne University chiefly. As I understand it, that's what the presidents do there. It's a provocative title. If Trump pardons himself, that part is provocative all by itself. If. I'm provoked. If Trump pardons himself, Biden should unpardon him. Well, that sounds like the sort of thing that's designed to make you say, that's not possible. You couldn't possibly be a expert on the Constitution, the presidency, and the pardon power and say that. Or could you? Let's find out. If President Trump makes the ill-advised decision to try to pardon himself before he leaves the White House in January, incoming President Joe Biden should respond with another unprecedented step. He should unpardon his predecessor. And it does sound like a scheme that would have been invented by Trump. I unpardon you. And he might even, does this give Trump ideas? I mean, he won't read this thing. This is egghead stuff. He's not going to read that. But if he thinks he can unpardon people, he might go, what if he goes around and unpardons people that Bill Clinton pardoned? Like Mark, was it Mark Rich? Was that the name of the guy who was the most controversial pardon that he issued on the way out the door? I shouldn't give this idea to right-wing radio types, but they're not listening. Let's get serious. None of you are going to tell them. All right, so what's this about? That might sound strange. It does. Even extra-constitutional, meaning outside of the four corners, anyway, of the Constitution. Not like, that's extra, like Trump, you would say, that's extra-constitutional, and he would, his mind would go to, is that like extra crispy at KFC, like more good stuff? No, it's against constitutional dictates here. So that might sound strange, even extra-constitutional. Certainly, there's nothing in the words of the Constitution or in historical precedent that speaks of undoing a self-pardon, but that's because there's nothing that authorizes a self-pardon in the first place. Okay. The Constitution's text, its original meaning, and historical precedent all point strongly against the validity of a self-pardon. Yes, okay. Most people do say that from time to time. What about the next part? In part, because it's unlikely that the legitimacy of such an audacious act would be determined in court, it's important for the new president, with the advice of his Justice Department, to take a stand against this dangerous precedent. The framers of the Constitution gave the chief executive enormous discretion in wielding pardons. Presidents have used this sprawling power to pardon political allies. George H.W. Bush pardoned former Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger, for instance. That's his example there. And even family members, where President Bill Clinton pardoned his half-brother, Roger Clinton. The pardon power, I guess that would be his second most controversial pardon. Anyway, the pardon power permits the president to pardon individuals of all past federal crimes and even crimes that have not been specified. if Trump chooses to pardon his children or any other person within his orbit, he can do it. I did see somebody theorizing the other day about why he wouldn't pardon his children, though I can't remember what it was exactly, but I guess it was to keep them in line before he handed over his inheritance to them. Anyway, where were we? Yes. If Trump chooses to pardon his children or any other person within his orbit, he can do it. But no president has ever tried to issue a self-pardon for good reason. Taking a pardon for oneself constitutes an act of self-dealing. My favorite concept. Running counter to the clear text that says presidents can, quote, grant pardons, which implies a grant to others. I don't know how strongly it really implies that, though. It also runs counter to the landmark holding of United States v. Nixon, the Watergate tapes case, in which Chief Justice Warren Burger wrote for a unanimous court that not even the president is above the law. By the way, always keep an eye out for here's something you learn about when you go to law school. There's a difference between United States v. Nixon, which is the Watergate tapes case, and Nixon v. United States, which doesn't involve Richard Nixon at all, but rather, what was his name? Was it Walter Nixon? I think a federal judge who, as I recall, I think the case was actually a suit. It was about impeachment, but impeachment of federal judges, specifically him. And if I recall correctly, and this will all be pretty screwed up if I recalled it incorrectly, but do check me. I think it was that the Senate actually impeached Walter Nixon, or rather, I guess the House did, and the Senate decided to hold its trial rather than hold a floor trial like they would with a president being impeached, and which is an enormous disruption and eats up all sorts of floor time. They assigned the case, I guess this must have been the first time they did this, assigned the case to the Judiciary Committee and said, you conduct the trial and report the results, and then the full Senate will vote on whether or not to accept the recommendation of the Judiciary Committee. And if they do, then he'll be presumably found guilty and impeached and removed from office. And Nixon sued, saying that that was a violation of the Constitution, that the trial had to be on the floor. And the Supreme Court decided, no, it didn't. And totally different case, even though it's about impeaching a Nixon. But you learn in law school that the order of the parties matters in this. And in these appellate cases that would go to the Supreme Court, it's the appellant, the person who's seeking review, whose name is listed first, and the defendant per se, or the appellee, really, in this point in the process, comes second. So in Nixon v. U.S., it's Nixon, Walter Nixon, appealing to the Supreme Court the lower court's decision that his impeachment process was constitutional. And in United States v. Nixon, it is the United States suing Richard Nixon, another way of telling the cases apart, for over the release of the Watergate tapes. Just an interesting legal aside for you. Anyway, in 1974, President Richard M. Nixon's own Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel issued an opinion stating that Nixon could not pardon himself based upon the fundamental rule that no one may be a judge in his own case. Likely for that reason, Nixon never pardoned himself. Not that you're really being a judge. The reasoning's weak, at least if that's it. You can't be a judge in your own case. Well, I'm not a judge. There's no judge in my case because I'm pardoning myself. F the judge in my case. Who cares? There's no judge. I'm just walking out of here. So I don't know. But then again, I will just remind you, the OLC says that a president can't pardon himself. Now, we didn't indict Trump or even say that he ought to be impeached, for instance, make that recommendation in the Mueller report, or that he ought to be indicted on anything, because the OLC has issued a memo that says that you can't indict a sitting president. And we've said 100 times on this show, it doesn't matter what the OLC memo says. You can repeal it, and two, you can issue another memo that says, we say different now. We say the exact opposite. Conscious of what we said before, that was a mistake, or that this case is totally different. I've argued that, you can't indict a sitting president because the defense that a sitting president would have to mount to against a serious indictment would be so distracting that he would be unable to perform his duties domestically or in foreign policy or national security. But since this president wasn't performing any of those duties anyway, it's not such a big deal. The big worry is that you're taking him away from important stuff. That's not the case with Donald J. Trump. Go ahead and indict him. So even if you want to keep that policy of not typically indicting sitting presidents because reasons, if those reasons aren't present, then neither is your conclusion, if you really want to save this thing. But again, I will just point out, OLC says you can't, and everyone runs around and says you can't. And they point to the memo. The same office says a president can't pardon himself, and we're running around saying, a president can pardon himself. Absolutely he can. He shouldn't, but he can. What happened to the power of the OLC now? It's just another one of those things. The journalists tell you everybody knows XYZ. Takes 60 votes to do anything in the Senate. Until David Waldman reminds you that you already know that that's not true, and you can change that at any time. And then you realize that was true, and went ahead and claimed that power and said somebody else told you, because I'm a nut and you don't want to credit me with this stuff. Okay, so where were we? This was the reason Nixon likely never pardoned himself. If Trump were to try to take this step, then, presumably under the theory that Democrats will retaliate against him, Biden should first refer the question to the Office of Legal Counsel. If the OLC in 2021 concurs with the precedent of that office in 1974, which is highly likely, this legal opinion would constitute a second piece of guidance shoring up the position that self-pardons are inherently unconstitutional. It would provide a basis for President Biden to then issue an executive order nullifying Trump's action. Okay. I mean, not everybody's going to agree, but I get your point now. I see where you're coming from and what logic you've laid down. That action is especially important because Biden seems to be disinclined to have his Justice Department prosecute Trump in the interests of moving on. This means there may never be any case or controversy involving the self-pardon issue. The question would arise only if federal criminal charges were filed against the former president. Thus, it's quite possible the matter will end there and never go to court. If it did, the Justice Department's consistent interpretation of limited presidential power would be influential, another reason for the new administration to weigh in. As Trump considers his options, he might want to keep in mind that a self-pardon would not be in his own best interests. The Supreme Court's 1915 ruling, and no one will care about that, that's ancient. Well, the 1915 ruling in Burdick v. United States, and you remember what that means. Burdick was the one saying the decisions below are wrong. And the parties do, in fact, switch positions in the style of the case depending on what is, as they say, the procedural posture. If the United States was the one appealing the decision below, it would be United States v. Burdick. But Burdick, the one who says the decision in the court below was wrong, and he goes to the Supreme Court, it's Burdick v. United States. Does that matter to you? Well, you got it now anyway. Burdick v. United States declared that a presidential pardon carries with it, quote, an imputation of guilt, unquote. Everyone's been pointing to this without knowing that it comes from Burdick. Doesn't matter. No one knows. And that acceptance of a pardon constitutes a confession. Maybe. When I interviewed President Gerald Ford in 1999 for a program at Duquesne University on his pardon of Nixon, Ford stressed that the Burdick case was a crucial factor in his decision. He felt it would give the American public what it wanted most, a legal admission of wrongdoing from Nixon. Ford told me that he sent a young lawyer, Benton L. Becker, to Nixon's compound in San Clemente, California, to explain the import of the Burdick case. Nixon's personal lawyer, Herbert Jack Miller, later confirmed this account and told me that Nixon initially sought to refuse to accept the pardon because he did not want to admit guilt. It actually mattered to him what Burdick said. That's crazy. It was only after Ford's lawyer threatened to walk away and withdraw the pardon that Nixon capitulated and accepted it, knowing its legal consequences. That is very important. I mean, I don't think Trump would agree to the same deal, but whatever. Because the acceptance of a pardon amounts to a legal admission of guilt, or it used to back in the day. Trump would suffer a self-inflicted wound if he pardons himself and is considering running for president again in 2024. One would hope that a major political party would be loath to nominate a candidate who had effectively confessed a federal crime. Well, they won't be. And they also won't admit that that's what it means. And again, I guess the dynamics, might as well examine the dynamics here, are that the pardon in Ford's hand that he proposed handing to Nixon came with that condition. Well, it's my understanding that Burdick says that accepting a pardon means that, or at least strongly implies, that you acknowledge your guilt. And Nixon says, well, I don't acknowledge my guilt. At which point the Ford team says, well, then we're not going to give you the pardon. Well, that dynamic is what makes Nixon change his mind. I need to have this pardon. I want that more than anything. Give me the pardon. Does it mean I have to pretend I believe I'm guilty? Sure. Then I'll go ahead and do that. But with that dynamic eliminated and Trump being on both sides of the pardon, both issuing it and accepting it, there's no demand that comes from it. In fact, he could have his own lawyers draft up something that says, I, President Donald J. Trump, hereby declare, for whatever reason, that I am giving this pardon to myself, Donald J. Trump, without any precondition under the Burdick rule, the Burdick case, that acceptance of this pardon implies guilt. And I, Donald J. Trump, potential defendant, recipient of this pardon, likewise make no acknowledgement of my guilt. And in this case, strangely enough, President Donald Trump isn't going to walk away from pardonee Donald J. Trump if pardonee, if that's even a word, Donald J. Trump doesn't agree to acknowledge his guilt. Magically, for some reason, all of this reluctance will be overcome by both President Donald J. Trump and recipient of the pardon, Donald J. Trump. They will magically come to an agreement that none of this pertains to them and issue the pardon anyway. So I don't know how well it works, but, once there's a President Biden and he's able to issue these executive orders nullifying these things, well, that's not something that President Donald J. Trump is around to do anything about. And it might actually work to undo it. It's very interesting. And again, the situation in this one, very different from the situation with the Ford-Nixon thing. And that precedent just might not apply either before Trump does this. It won't dissuade him from doing it. But I don't know whether any courts would feel like it was interesting and persuasive after the fact either. I'm just not sure. Because the acceptance of a pardon amounts to, oh yes, right, we already said, then there was the other problem. A major political party is supposed to be loath to nominate a candidate who had effectively confessed a federal crime. One, it wouldn't trouble the Republicans because they would just do it because whatever, power, I'll take it. We think he's going to win, or we think he could kill us if we don't endorse him for president in 2024. Whatever the reasoning is, we're going to go ahead and do it. And two, this guy who we're being asked to back and nominate says, no, I don't acknowledge that issuing a pardon implies guilt or that accepting a pardon implies guilt. And neither as the president or as the recipient of this pardon, neither party to this pardon believes in the guilt of the person named, and we don't admit it. And no, and you shouldn't admit it either, and go ahead and nominate me. Although, again, part of the logic in this piece, and from outside of this piece too, is that, again, right, like with my argument about the OLC memo about indicting a sitting president, if the reasons for the prohibition don't exist in this case, then neither should the prohibition exist in this case. Well, here too, the reason why a pardon would be valid under Burdick, that is, that it exemplifies on the one hand, the president's plenary power to issue those pardons, which we don't have a lot of questions about and can dismiss from the analysis. But on the other side, there is Supreme Court precedent that says you really can't effect a true and valid pardon unless there is acknowledgement of guilt on the side of the recipient, as decided under Burdick and as reinforced in the story, at least, about, it wasn't a court case, but the story about how Ford's pardon to Nixon went down. It's impossible, because self-dealing, as we mentioned up at the top of this piece, or as our author, Gormley, mentioned, because of the self-dealing nature of this pardon, there can't be established an arm's length agreement, an understanding of the nature of what's being offered and what it means to accept. And if that's absent, then what you have is something other than a valid pardon, because a valid pardon carries with it this implication. This one does not. And so it's not a pardon. It's a fake hall pass. It's a note forged from the parents about your absence from school the previous day. It's a note. It's signed. It says, please excuse Donald from class, but it's not a valid one. The fact that the words are on it shouldn't fool the Supreme Court of the United States, right? Similarly, this pardon shouldn't fool the Supreme Court of the United States or anybody else who decides something. I mean, to bring it back to the earlier part of the show, there are going to be, apparently, members of Congress waving around pieces of paper on the floor of the House during the joint session on January 6th saying, this document is signed and notarized and everything. We read about how it was notarized. That could cause a problem, right? But a notarized document, notarized, for God's sake, that's supposed to mean something in this country. God damn it, back in my day, we notarized. All right, yeah, right. He's waving something around and he says, these are electoral votes right here. No, they're not. Similarly, Donald Trump will be waving around a piece of paper. This is a pardon. No, it isn't. And it's funny because the entire country appears poised to say, that stupid thing in your hand, Louis Gohmert, is not a set of X number of 11, right? Electoral votes from Arizona. Or do I have it backwards? All right, anyway, I don't have the number offhand, but I think that's what it was. That's dumb. That's obviously a counterfeit. That thing in your hand over there, Donald Trump, though, that is a valid pardon because, I don't know, a president issued it. And I've always been taught in 8th grade civics that whatever the president issues by way of pardon, is just real. But there are reasons it's real. And this is why you go to law school, why there's nuance to things, why you can't just pull crap off the internet and say, if it says pardon and it comes from the president, that's it. There's a much deeper understanding to what these pardons are. Did you read Burdick? Burdick? What's that? I never heard of it. Yeah, well, it didn't come up in my own research on the internet. Well, go to law school and learn about why pardons exist and where they came from and examine what elements need to belong over the course of centuries as we learn through these cases and other precedents. What are the elements of a pardon? And if the elements of a pardon are not present and all you have is a piece of paper issued by one person and accepted by the same person, not even a different person, is it a pardon? Well, if you now have grounds to say no, it's not, you should take it and use it. Okay. If Trump is foolish enough, there's another paragraph here. Trump's legacy would be forever tarnished, whatever. Addressing the Constitutional Convention in 1787, James Iredell of North Carolina, later one of the first Supreme Court justices, so who cares, right, sought to assuage fears about the reckless use of the pardon power. Good. The greatest deterrent to a president abusing the power, he said, would be the, quote, damnation of his fame to all future ages. Yes, except Trump won't care about that. That's true. But okay. If Trump is foolish enough to take that risk, his successor should not allow it to stand for the benefit of the American presidency and future ages. That is very high-minded. But I'll take it. It's a good conclusion. This works. I mean, in my view. So what, right? But no, seriously, I think you can build a serious case for explaining even to the American public why this thing doesn't work. And, I think he's done a pretty good job of giving us the first half of it. All you need is to take half an hour of the tape of this show and play it to every person in America alongside this commentary to convince them that the truth is that I knew self-dealing as a concept would get us to something amazing and high-minded at some point. But yes, I think you can make the case that it is the self-dealing that undoes the key element of a true and valid presidential pardon. And I think actually if you made the analogy to a note that you forged for yourself to excuse yourself from school, even though it says your parents' name on it and everything, nobody would accept that as valid, and you ought not to accept the same thing in something as important as a presidential pardon either. I think that might actually work. Anyway, on this show anyhow. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. I see for some reason Joan's call is coming through on every computer except the one on which I need to actually accept the call. And perhaps I can send her a note and tell her what's going on. Or maybe I can just call her directly. Let me try that. For some reason, it's just not working. Let me see if we can't ring it up. Here we go. All right. Well, at least the audio is coming through. Hi, Joan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well,
I thought you were snubbing me.
Yeah, I know. I had to like hang up in order to actually call you. And then when I hit the button, I very rarely do that. But then I don't need to use it. And then I noticed that I guess the way Skype expresses what's just happened is by telling you call declined. And it's like, well, no, I just need to move it to a different computer is all. Damn, that's cold, declined. But I guess
yes. I thought you wanted to talk to me.
I did, and then I do, and yeah, every once in a while, I have Skype open on all of these computers. You know, not all of which are connected to the feed for the show. There's only one. And for some reason, all the other computers that I have, including my phone, I got an iPad nearby, I got 2 computer screens that aren't running the show, so that I can't miss the call. All are saying, Joan's calling. Okay, there's one more computer on which I'd like to have that call come through. Really, it shouldn't, you should be able to program it so it doesn't, the call only goes to one. Which one would you want it to be? The important one. No, we will not do that for you. No. So, all right. Well, we fixed it. Good morning. It's good to hear from you. How are things going for you there in Idaho? Nothing's on fire anymore, right?
No, fires are out.
Good. Okay.
Coronavirus is raging.
Yeah, well, that fire is still on.
Mass coals, as my friends call them.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right. Well,
it's dangerous out there.
Yes.
I probably am not leaving the house until I leave to get my vaccination. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, you got to be careful, and you never know. It is kind of going crazy. I do see Idaho pop up from time to time on these various top 10 lists of one metric or another. So, okay.
Yeah, and the worst metric, of course, is that we're full of horrible people.
Well, yeah, I'm glad. Well, you said it, not me. I'm not saying that about Idaho.
The kind of news we've been making in the past few weeks has not been good news. But, at least yesterday it was Oregon's turn.
Oh, yes, right. I didn't even get to mention that, but I think probably everybody saw something about it. But another of the protests, but really kind of rising to a new level, gathering outside of the state capitol and then trying to force their way in with guns and kicking the glass out of doors. I saw as well, but I don't think they got in and got anywhere. Is that right? They just sort of...
As far as I could see, no, they didn't.
So, okay, that's good.
I read one Twitter feed from a freelance writer whose name escapes me right now, and I don't have her tweets in front of me, who also was in the protests in Portland over the summer, and her thread was really, she'd sort of just infiltrated the group. She was there as surreptitiously recording and reporting as she could be. And it was scary, the stuff that she was hearing and reporting about. And it's all tied in with the difficult circumstances these folks find themselves in, as does everybody, because of the pandemic.
Yes.
The problem is they're blaming their economic straits not on, as we do, a federal government that completely biffed this, but on a state government that they say is overreaching.
Yes, by restricting gatherings and having people wear masks.
By doing what Trump and the federal government wouldn't do, trying to respond to this in a smart public health scientific kind of way by saying, shut down.
Yeah.
Mask up.
Right. So, I did see this same series of tweets. I'll see if I can find it and share it with everybody so that everyone can see it. But it did make the rounds yesterday. A lot of video clips of what was going on. And from her description, I think they managed to get kind of into the building briefly, and that the police kind of sealed another door behind them and then maced everybody. And so I was glad to see that they actually, you can get maced as a right-wing, gun-toting protest lunatic. After all, I've been waiting to see whether that would happen. And as dangerous as the situation was, I was somewhat gratified anyway to see, well, no, in the end, the police said, get out of here, and maced them. And for all the talk of, we'll shoot our way in, they didn't. Which
they didn't.
I'm glad.
Although they did use bear spray against cops.
Yeah. Well,
they
that too, you should not
assaulted
be with
another reporter, a reporter from KOPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting, was tackled.
Okay, yes. I saw that video clip too. It was very well done there.
I just DM'd you the lead tweet there from her.
Okay, I'm glad you found it. Well, I will share that with everybody, and I did. It was great work in terms of showing us what was going on. Certainly no one else was doing it in real time the way she was, and I assume it's been written up since then. Laura Jadid.
And listening to the people there and getting a better sense. In Idaho, it doesn't feel like there's that same kind of economic anxiety.
Oh, okay.
I hate to use the words, but there is a lot of economic anxiety behind that. Here, it really is just the Eamon Bundy, because nobody's, we don't have the same kinds of restrictions because we have a Republican governor who's completely terrified by these people and won't do it. So here it's more just strutting their stuff, being obnoxious, intimidating people because they can.
Yes.
You got the sense from her reporting on the ground in Oregon that it was people who are very frightened and who, are down to their last dollars and who are kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
Granted, this is a really, really bad way to respond to that.
Right.
But it looks like the motivations are slightly different. The end result is still the same. People are being endangered. And this is bad stuff. But it was just nuanced reporting that was interesting to see.
Yeah, Laura Jadid, I guess, is the name of the reporter here. Now that you've shared this thread with me. I also note that she pointed out, I guess she reported that somebody who I guess considered themselves to be a lawmaker sympathetic to the position of this crowd came out to speak to them And it was interesting that what they said, the crowd was saying, yeah, you guys are in there doing a terrible job and oppressing us, et cetera, et cetera. That means we need to go in there and drag you people out. And this legislator immediately realizes they're not willing to go that far. They say, no. What you need to do is vote the Democrats out, which is, standard response from a Republican, of course. And not that I wouldn't tell you, well, what you really need to do is vote the Republicans out. But the crowd, interestingly, kind of was like, what? First of all, that's, we're kind of, we like to say we're out for blood, not really like wait 2 years and vote. But also, a good part of that crowd was probably also, if not there for this purpose, of the mind that, but we've all learned that voting is rigged and useless anyway. So we came to drag you out and get rid of you guys that way because the president of the United States says there's no way to vote you guys out. And then I guess the guy said, I got to go. Time for me to get back inside and negotiate something or cast some votes or something. I got to leave. But then, push came to shove and people got maced and I guess nobody fought their way into the floor. Kind of they had, at that point, the dog had caught the car and they didn't know what to do. And the police said, go home instead. And I don't know. I guess they did. Which I'm glad, but they didn't have to decide that. They all brought all the gear that should have enabled them to pretty easily overcome the police if they felt like it and shoot their way in. They got the helmets, the vests, the big guns.
They certainly came prepared to do that.
Yeah, some of them anyway. Others came in nice warm down coats with big Trump flags that wouldn't have helped very much, but there were definitely people in the, and I guess it still is, cosplay. I mean, if you show up armed for that with a crowd behind you that says, yeah, shoot your way past the cops, go in there and drag legislators out, and you say, well, now that I actually have the opportunity to do this, I'm, I don't know, I got an appointment later on, I gotta get my hair cut, I gotta go. So, I'm glad to be able to question their dedication to this cause. Because it's a dumb cause and a bad one and dangerous. But there's plenty of video of it. Everybody got that. So good thing no shots were fired. Good thing it's not a widespread phenomenon, though we did see similar sentiment earlier in Michigan. People showed up, but they haven't done it since, I don't think. But it's just kind of amazing. That, and of course, then they all go home and write blog posts about how their Republican electeds are spineless sellouts. But I noticed that you are too. So
yes.
So, and good thing. That's all. I'm not complaining. Let them be spineless sellouts. That's the best role for them.
And, at some point there's probably going to be Idaho people going along with these Oregon folks. Something new that's happened in recent weeks.
Yeah.
Pretty much the worst spots for Oregon are along the Idaho border. So Oregon has started running its PSAs on being safe, its public health PSAs, telling people to mask up and do all this stuff in Idaho.
Uh-huh.
Never before have the public service announcements from Oregon been shown here. I mean,
Wow.
there is media market overlap, but still,
but
I've never seen that
target them
before.
That is interesting. Like Radio Free Idaho, broadcasting from the pirate ship Oregon.
Yeah.
Wow. To the free peoples of Idaho who still want to live. Yeah. Wear a mask. Your government is lying to you. Wow.
It's very strange.
It's very last days, strange. Don't you think? That is weird. That's a great, interesting observation and amazing that we're even at that point. But okay. I don't know what to make of it, but it's a...
I don't either. I'm trying to figure out what I mean, there's a Costco over there, and there is no sales tax in Oregon, so that's probably part of it.
Okay.
Weed is legal in Oregon, so, and it's not here, so that's probably part of it.
Oh. Yeah, I bet they wear their masks to get in there.
Yeah.
Right. Well, but I'm against
I
this, but I
somehow
want that
don't
weed.
see the weed crowd, and I don't know. I don't know. All I do know is that Idaho is infecting our neighbors, and I'm sorry, Oregon.
Yeah.
It's not me.
Yeah, right. It's a tragedy for those in Oregon, but you do have the weed, so I guess you could make yourself
Yeah,
feel better.
you can make yourself feel a little bit better with
Right.
that.
Wear your mask and have fun. Okay, that is
So
weird.
that's the report from the hinterlands. It's
Yeah,
grim.
man. Yeah, I guess so. And I guess speaking of the economic anxiety, et cetera, we come to the facts of the situation on Capitol Hill. Are we past with this thing? Did everybody do what they needed to do to pass the gigantic package, which turned out to be, I think chiefly you would describe it as well, do they style it a continuing resolution plus COVID relief grafted onto that? Everybody sort of thought COVID was coming.
No, it's not a continuing
Instead.
resolution.
Okay.
It's a spending bill. It's
Full
an
year?
omnibus spending bill.
Okay, they did go that route. Okay.
They did go that. So it's passed. They still don't have the National Defense Authorization Act.
Yeah, that's another problem.
I mean, that is passed, but Trump has yet to veto it, and Rand Paul is being Rand Paul,
Yes,
trying
I
to
saw he
figure
was
out
doing
how he
something.
can help Trump not override the veto. For whatever reason, Paul has just decided that this is the last stand for Trump, and he's going to help him. So after the votes last night to get everything passed, he held the Senate open, hanging out on the floor,
Yeah.
maskless,
Okay. That's
wasting
Rand Paul.
time fighting over the return calendar for the Senate. Normally, it would not come back until basically January 3rd. They would probably have to come back if Trump vetoes this thing, but now Paul has made clear that he is going to try to fight to delay this until afternoon on January 3rd, should Trump veto it, so that Congress has to start from scratch with it. Because the new Congress comes in at noon on January 3rd, and the business of the old Congress is dead.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So he was holding the floor open so they couldn't adjourn. I gathered from it that essentially by doing so, it made it easier for Trump to hold on to the bill and only send back the veto notice such that it arrives with very little or zero time left for the Congress to consider overriding it, and then dies with the dissolution of the, what are we on, 116th Congress?
I think it's the 116th,
Yeah. So, okay, interesting. And I guess Paul's interests, probably some other interests, also aligns with. I mean, he can help Trump make a last stand for whatever reason, but I think he probably also has some substantive. The bill's giant enough that he might be about arms transfers to Middle Eastern countries that he occasionally makes noise about opposing. Or it could just be pure Trump love.
You know, he's in a pissing match with Liz Cheney, and maybe it's just about that. He says it's about his ongoing opposition to the war in Afghanistan.
Okay. Could be part of it.
It could be. You know, it's Rand Paul.
Yeah.
He's not going to really have a principled reason. He's Rand Paul.
Yeah. All right.
It's attention getting. It's who knows what. Who knows what.
So it could be cause for some last minute drama or rushing around trying to make sure you have votes to override the veto. Does anything super terrible really happen though if the veto sticks? I mean, I don't know whether I want to root for it or not.
Well, it would be satisfying for everybody, at least on the Democratic side, if the last thing they got to do with Trump was override his veto.
Yeah.
That was
true.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah, just for the sake of sticking it to him. The bill itself.
But, passing it in the first weeks of starting over from scratch isn't really starting over from scratch. They just take the same bill, go through the process again, and have it ready for Biden on January 21st. So
yeah, you certainly could do it that way. to some extent, the makeup of Congress changes, and you might have votes to gather up. But if you're not worried about a veto, then it's less of a chore. But you do have the
it
notes.
Passed both houses quite easily.
Okay.
With veto-proof margins.
Yeah.
The votes are there to override. It's just now a calendar game. And Rand Paul.
Okay. Well, likely won't change anybody's life listening to the show, but always worth knowing what's going on procedurally. And when Rand Paul is trying to screw around with things, and when Donald Trump, now here he is, I guess, making his last stand, and I guess it would be equally sweet if it's not overriding Trump's veto, then I suppose you can hang your hat on. He vetoes it, it dies, and you say, all right, here's the reality, Donald Trump. We're going to wait 2 weeks and pass it later.
Yeah.
So you're out. When you're gone, we're now going to stand here and tap our foot until you're out of here, and then we'll pass exactly what we said we were going to pass, and you'll have nothing to say about it. And that'll have to be sweet enough.
Because on January 6th, we're voting for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So, that's minor drama compared to what I think we're probably going to see out of Trump.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
He's not going to get the military to help him in a coup.
No, they're suckers and losers.
Not going to seize the voting machines. But there's still a lot of damage he can do. So, laugh at him on one side, but at the same time be aware that he's just going to burn as much stuff down as he possibly can.
Yeah.
Perhaps even literally,
Right, why not? Sure. Light it on fire. There will probably be some things that actually are lit on fire, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did some actual damage. I could see Trump thinking, I've seen this on the movies. I'll take some incriminating documents and burn them in an ashtray on the Resolute desk, my desk, and not thinking about what it takes to make a movie versus, reality. You could light something on fire that's much too large for whatever he's burning it in and start a fire in the Oval Office. I'm sure it would be suppressed quickly, but that would be something to leave with fire damage to the Oval Office. I didn't mean it. I was just trying to burn some documents. Whatever.
It could happen.
Yeah.
Anything could.
Right. I did read he's
Except
stuffing
Donald Trump
bags
being
full of
president
goodies.
after January 21st.
Yes,
January
right. That's the
20th.
one thing.
That's not going to happen.
Right. We have been, I've been puzzling out, what do they think they're really going to do? And the answer essentially is, okay, all the articles say, well, it'll come to nothing, because I don't see how it could. But I am curious, for instance, whether, how are they going to get, or is there any role for these forged electoral vote documents that people are sending to play in the drama, other than being waved around by members of Congress on the floor, insisting that this is a real thing, and the chair refusing to entertain them? Or is the fact that Pence is in on the negotiations over January 6th with Trump in the White House, along with members of the Republican members of the House, is Pence trying to figure out a way to say, yeah, bring that up here, I want to see that? Or is he just attending because Trump said, get in here?
I think he's just attending because he has to.
Yeah.
I don't, he's going to skip town immediately after.
Yeah.
He's getting out of the country immediately after.
That is amazing. Lock the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The danger in it is that there is going to be a large cadre of people that will still follow Trump, some of whom will be in Congress, who will insist that Joe Biden is not the legitimate president.
Yeah. They do that all the time.
And violence can ensue. And, it's the people not believing in the election, in our processes, in our government.
Yes.
That's problematic.
It is. And that's...
It's kind of dangerous.
Yes, right.
It makes it easier for Mitch McConnell eventually to obstruct Biden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
which, no doubt, is in his plans, of course. But yeah, it is obviously it's quite dangerous to do what he's doing. I don't know whether Trump maybe he just doesn't believe it. Maybe he doesn't care. I don't know. But it's no longer his concern after the 20th. So he figures, if I'm not concerned about it, neither should anybody in the country be concerned about it, because what I say is important and what the country wants is not. And nobody else feels that way, oddly enough. But
if he can make money off of it, he's going to keep it up.
Yeah, I guess so. And he's found ways to do that. And Jared has stolen all of the campaign money and I guess pocketed it somewhere. And I'm not 100% sure that, I guess Trump figures, well, I can live off of that. But I don't know whether maybe Jared doesn't sign it over to him. Me and Ivanka are keeping this.
Jared might need it for his own legal defense.
Right. Could be. I wonder who. Well, anyway. So I guess that's also what Kimberly Guilfoyle was dancing so enthusiastically about the other day. Was she found out that Jared has $1 million to give her.
Oh, God, they're horrible people. They're such horrible people.
Yeah.
And speaking of horrible people, the one last thing that Mitch McConnell did to the American working people, he couldn't get his liability blanket immunity for corporations into this bill.
Incredible. Yeah.
So he blocked an extension of paid leave in this bill.
I guess. Yeah. That seems like small potatoes, especially if you really believe that, there's a legal principle at stake in this immunity thing, to then say, well, if I can't help business save hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars in liability, how about if I help some smaller subset of businesses save tens or possibly hundreds of millions of dollars in paid leave, or maybe even just a couple thousand. It might not even really help that many people or that many businesses. It'll hurt lots of people, but
it will hurt lots of people. Lots of people will have to go to work sick.
Yeah.
Lots of people will go to work sick and infect their coworkers and infect their customers and be exposed and, infect their families.
Right. Which at this point still would carry liability because he wasn't able to get us. That's interesting. So I can't protect you from liability. So what I'd like to do is increase that liability. He didn't think about it that way. That was the problem.
No, he thought about it as, I don't know, a fit of pique because he couldn't get his way on liability, so he screwed the Democrats this way?
I guess so. So I couldn't get liability protection for you, so now your Subway sandwich will be made by someone who's sick with COVID. Ha! Take that. Oh, wait, that's not so good.
No.
Well, I guess he did. All right, well, that's bad news. He just wants to, I guess, like you say, fit of pique. Somebody's got to get hurt here. And it's not going to be me.
Oh, well, it's workers getting hurt. That's been the through line on this, on everything McConnell has done. The peons have to hurt. He has been apparently extremely bothered by the fact that people getting the extra $600 per week on unemployment were making more than they did in their jobs.
That really bothers
Which...
Okay.
From our perspective is the problem with work in America. You're getting paid so little for your regular work that you are better off on unemployment.
Yeah.
But from his perspective, no, that means that the rabble isn't out there working for peanuts and being grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, it's the big problem for him. And, yeah, between that and, they usually say, well, it's a big moral hazard paying people to not work, but no moral hazard in, obstructing all aid for stamping out the virus or even acknowledging that it's real, but then jumping to the front of the line and taking the shot as quickly as possible. So,
right.
Wow. Well, he's an awful guy, and he's
an
on
awful
for
guy.
6 more years.
We really have to win those 2 seats in Georgia.
Yeah. Can't get rid of him, but we can make him not the majority leader. That's all there is to do. And I guess all efforts between now and January 5th need to be concentrated on that.
It really is the most important thing happening now.
I agree. All right. Well, so we can hope that things go well there and that everybody turns out and casts those votes. The early voting was already underway. I don't know when they call that off. And then you have to vote in person.
Christmas.
Christmas
Eve, either the 23rd or 24th. So tomorrow or the next day.
All right.
But, there are things that you can still do, get out the vote efforts, and you can find those in any Georgia story
yes.
at Daily Kos and on our action pages.
And helping people pay for those efforts, early Christmas present to yourself and to the people of Georgia. I know if you have last-minute shopping to do down in Georgia and you're trying to decide between that and getting out to vote, people could take IOUs. Give them the vote. That's the best Christmas present you could give them. And the thing isn't going to arrive in time in the mail anyway, so don't worry about it. Yeah, go out, get that vote cast, and save our country. I know we keep making you do that down there. But you could also ask of your state government to get rid of your stupid runoff system at some point. It's probably designed by racists anyway. And do that after you save the country. Okay. Thanks for coming in and doing your part to save the country, Joan. We appreciate it. We'll talk with you, I guess, next week in between the Christmas and New Year holiday if you're available. See you then.
I will be. We'll talk to you then.
Okay.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy come up next. Justice is available to do his part as a patriot to save the country. Find out how by tuning in to his recap of the day's stories. We'll start off with the Michael Flynn story being a disgrace to his uniform. It needs to be rebuked by the military, he says, and he'll tell you exactly why.